Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back. It's for another predictions video, and in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Munguia versus Bazinyan fight. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Munguia is 43-1 with 34 KOs, and Bazinyan is 32-0-1 with 23 KOs. This fight is a 12-round fight in the super middleweight division. Munguia's last fight was a loss via unanimous decision versus Canelo, and Bazinyan's last fight was a draw versus Finn. This is Munguia's first fight with Top Rank, and to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I say, this is Munguia's return after the loss versus Canelo, and it's a fight in which I think it's a good return. Certain people aren't too happy with this fight being made, possibly thinking about other options that could have been made into better fights for Munguia and bigger opportunities. Of course, having the 43 fights, he didn't really want him to have too big of a step down, but I don't really necessarily think this is. I mean, Bazinyan, of course, is still an undefeated fighter. He's had a couple big wins. I mean, when you think about that Ellis win, that was quite a big win for him. Even Atlantes Fox was a relatively big win for him. So there has been some, like I mentioned, relatively big names in which he has beaten. So I don't think that this is necessarily a bad fight to make. I think it's going to be interesting to see Bazinyan kind of back on the big shows and back fighting big fights. It's been a little while. He's had a few fights where he's just been campaigning around Canada and just picking up wins and things like that. And of course, last time out, it was a fight in which, to be honest, a lot of people thought that perhaps he didn't win. There was definitely times, which I'm going to speak about in a bit more, in which he didn't really look too convincing, and he looked quite hurt, quite damaged, and looked like he wasn't really having the best of rounds. But of course, he managed to get a draw. Does that mean you kind of go from a draw versus Finn to then somebody like a Munguia, who, like I say, has just come off a loss versus one of the pound best fighters ever? So is that warranted? I don't know, but like I say, it's an interesting matchup. I don't think it's a bad matchup. I suppose for Munguia's return fight, I think there could have definitely been a lot worse options in which he could have fought, and it's still, Bazinyan hasn't had that experience of a loss, so he doesn't necessarily have that losing mindset. He doesn't necessarily know how to lose, so it's still going to be, I believe, interesting, intriguing, and on a weekend of great boxing action, I'm sure this is going to add to it. And in general, it's going to be intriguing, of course, to see the effects of Munguia off the loss. Of course, it's against Canelo, so there's nothing really to take away and discredit him for that, because a loss versus Canelo is still not bad, and the way that he did it was he gave himself a lot of credit and really had his stock rise, because it was not a bad loss at all, and he really fought and showed a lot of heart and everything like that. I mean, it's very similar to that of berlanga just this last weekend. It was a very gutsy, heart kind of shown performance in which he really did have to dig deep and did have to push through after getting knocked down, and still managed to do it, and well, still managed to get through all the rounds. And so it's still, like I say, gonna grow his stock, and I believe every fight he is improving, and I believe he's still with Freddie Roach, and he's been progressing him excellently as a fighter, and has really been developing, and you've, like I mentioned, seen these developments come through. Possibly was that Canelo fight for him too early in his career? Maybe you have to think so, but I give him credit for taking it, and like I say, he showed a massive improvement in that fight from the ones that we've seen prior. But like I say, if he keeps developing the way he's developing, if that development hasn't slowed down because of the loss, I think he could still make it to be a world champion possibly one day, even if it isn't against Canelo, even if he is moving up in weight or something like that. And we'll have to wait and see. But of course, like I mentioned, he has to get through Bazinyan. This is a step up in rounds. I believe this is his first 10 round, or the first time, first 12 rounder, and the first time going 12 rounds. And so it's going to be an interesting test. That I suppose that's another reason why people perhaps aren't too happy with this fight, just because of the fact of, like I say, it's Bazinyan hasn't actually fought the full 12 round distance. But it's still going to be intriguing to see if, well, if he is able to step up, if he can do that, and he's going to be coming with that underdog mindset, I'm sure, and he's going to be very determined because it is his first 12 rounder. So that's of course going to play a factor. Of course, like I say, Munguia's first fight with Top Rank, I was very surprised to see Top Rank get him, and Golden Boy were weird to let him go. I mean, everything that Oscar De La Hoya does, to be honest, is a lot of the time quite unusual. But to let Munguia go after the loss versus Canelo was interesting. He was obviously branded and bigged up so much by Oscar, and then for him to just kind of get rid of him just because perhaps he lost to Canelo or anything, or I don't know if Top Rank came in with just a really good beard and Munguia chose to move ways, but yeah, it's weird. It seems like Oscar De La Hoya has never really been one to comfort fighters if they lose and things like that, but not either way, it's going to still be an interesting journey seeing him with Top Rank, seeing him develop with Top Rank, even if he does lose this fight, seeing where he can go and progress in his career with them. Of course, they've got the likes of Umbili and fighters like that, so there are names in the super middleweight division in which they are involved with. But to speak about them both individually as fighters, Munguia, I believe he has got fast hands and he does fight at a typically high pace. I think perhaps he's slowing down that pace a little bit more. I think in the Canelo fight he upped it again, but in the Ryder fight before that, he did slow the pace down a little bit more. I think he started a bit slower. I think he was trying to show his boxing, and it was working to be honest. But when he did up the pace, when he did go through the gears, it really kind of showed, and then that's how he got Ryder out. And I think against Canelo, he was into the later rounds again, really up into tempo, really trying to push and everything like that. Of course, it just wasn't working in the end. Of course, now he's faced adversity. I mean, he's been hurt in, I believe, multiple fights now. I think Derevyanchenko hurt him. Uh, Canelo, of course, dropped him. So there has been multiple times in which he has faced that adversity and then been able to push through. He's shown that he can dig deep. And before that Canelo fight, there were a lot of question marks around if he was able to kind of dig deep and show heart and things like that when things got tough because he kind of did that a little bit against Derevyanchenko, but that was a lot lesser opponent than some of the world level opponents in which he will be facing now. And so, he really did show that he can dig deep though, and like I say, his stock did grow from that Canelo fight. He lets his hands go, and often is quite overwhelming when he wants to be and when he wants to let his hands go. Um, he's beginning to seemingly become a bit more smart and use his jab a bit more than what he once was. Like I said, I give that credit to his coach and his training team, and like I say, he's becoming more disciplined. He is developing. He is learning. He seems like he does have that IQ there. It's just actually being able to use it and execute it. He, of course, has that power. He has a good, strong jab when he, like I say, he does use it, and like I say, he is now using it more. He's typically quite physical. He is a big presence in super middleweight division. So, like I say, it wouldn't surprise me if at some point he does end up moving up because he is a big guy. He controls the centre a lot of the time. He can fight at a mid or in close range. His work rate is typically pretty excellent, and he was throwing all the way pretty much to the final bell versus Canelo. And like I say, he is improving. Negatives about him, I think he can be messy slash drawn into a fight a bit at times. Like I say, he has been improving and kind of stopping doing that a bit, but there are still times in which you can see him get drawn into a fight and become a bit messy, and that's where Canelo really just kind of showed that mental weakness in him and then executed his amazing counters against that. He can headhunt a bit. When he does go to the body, it's excellent, but he can headhunt a bit. He can also fight emotionally, and I think perhaps Canelo may have tapped into that as well. There's been a few fights in which I think he's shown that he does fight emotionally, and that's when, like I said again, things can become messy because he is really getting drawn into that. His head can be on the line, similar to that of Bazinyan. His footwork isn't amazing, similar to that of Bazinyan, but I think he was showing a little bit more of that against Ryder. He was looking a bit looser on his feet. He can stand straight in front of you. Perhaps he can throw for the sake of it sometimes. Like I say, he is slowing down and picking his shots better in the earlier rounds. But against Canelo, it seemed like, I don't know if he just got mentally broken or something, but he did seem like he was just throwing certain shots for the sake of it and pretty much getting caught every time in which he was doing that and wasn't really making that adjustment to stop that. His accuracy in close can sometimes be a problem. I think he can move back and forth in straight lines, resetting after getting clipped or something like that and trying to circle back. He just doesn't really do that a lot. He can be typically quite flat-footed. Like I say, it's improving, but he can be quite flat-footed, similar to that of Bazinyan. He doesn't always attempt to actually go for counters a lot of the time. I think when his rhythm is disrupted, that's when he can have problems. He can come in with quite wide hooks, similar again to that of Bazinyan. I think there are a lot of similarities between the two of them, and he can cross his feet and just like say stand straight in front of you, similar again to that of Bazinyan. To speak about Bazinyan as a fighter, I think typically he's quite accurate with a lot of his work, and he is throwing all over the body a lot of the time, and it is like I say typically quite good accurate work. He has that power, he's shown that he can hurt, and against Ellis that is that kind of more highlight kind of knockout for him, and he's shown that he had that power. He's typically a come forward type fighter, like I say, similar to that of Munguia, but perhaps Munguia might be able to fight better on the back foot. When he uses his jab, that's a good way to set up his shots. It's just when he does actually use it, again, like I say, similar to Munguia, typically, well, I think this is going to be a very good stylistic matchup. He has a high guard. He's got good body work. Like I say, he's got varied combinations. A lot of the time, you're not really too sure what he'll throw. He can dig deep. I think in that last performance, obviously, it was against a lesser opponent, but he's shown that he can dig deep, and perhaps he was overlooking that opponents or something like that, thinking of bigger fights. But even then, he still had to push for adversity and dig deep himself. He can kind of find what works and then perhaps keep doing it, which can make predictability, but he is able to find what works. He doesn't really seemingly respect his opponents, which I think is going to be an interesting factor coming into this Munguia fight, because of course Munguia is going to be the favourite, but I don't believe that Bazinyan is going to respect him, and he is going to keep coming forwards. He typically has a high tempo himself. He's quite good at catching shots, like I say, with that high guard. He typically wants to be fighting in close a lot of the time, and when he does get in there, that's where he does, in my opinion, a lot of his best work. And he is quite good at closing range at typically quite a fast pace. I wouldn't say he's crazy explosive, but he can close the range relatively well. Negatives about him, like I say, can be predictable. Of course, like I said, this is a step up for him. He has his head on the line as well as Munguia, but perhaps not got that speed in which Munguia has. Working angles, he doesn't always do too well. These wide shots can be a little bit predictable, similar to that of Munguia. He can overcommit. His on the back foot, he seems to be very uncomfortable and doesn't really seemingly want to go onto the back foot a lot of the time. Handling physicality, I think he can get pushed up and can get backed up. Typically, sometimes when he's against me, his own kind of height and body type against LS, he really didn't want to move back and was really able to handle the physicality, but against Finn, he just looked like he couldn't do it quite as well, and he did tire a bit, and that's when he was getting caught with quite a lot of shots. Moving off the ropes, he wasn't really doing that against Finn. Like I say, couldn't cross his feet, can tire, footwork, stays in mid-range a bit, well, stays in range a bit too long. Finding his range with his jab isn't excellent. He's typically quite an accurate jab, but just finding the range of it can sometimes be off. Can definitely be timed coming in, because he is coming in straight forward lines again with the head on the line. Flat-footed, a lot more flat-footed than that of Munguia, and can seem a bit uncomfortable, like I say, when he is trying to get pushed back, when he is getting put onto the back foot a bit more. Munguia is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Munguia will win via TKO in round 8. I am a bit of a fan of Bazinyan, and I wouldn't mind to see him go on to win this fight, but I do think Munguia is going to be that too much. I think he is going to improve with this fight. I think he's going to come in, show a bit more discipline, keep it possibly out of mid-range with that strong jab in which he has, like I say, show improvement, and then really be able to get Bazinyan onto the back foot and use the physicality. And even if he starts headhunting a bit, I think Munguia can still find the target of Bazinyan, because he's very much there to be hit quite a bit at a time. And Bazinyan is going to be thrown. It's going to be a back and forth contest, I believe, at times. But I think Munguia is going to have that physical strength and that ability to put, like I say, Bazinyan onto the back foot and then hurt him, damage him, and then probably be able to stop him, because, of course, we have also seen Bazinyan hurt as well, especially into the later rounds. Then who we could go on to fight, I mean, the likes of Pacheco could be a big fight to be made. I think Pacheco is definitely one or two more fights before he's really ready to be able to fight somebody like a Canelo, so I wouldn't really want him to go in there against Canelo next. I think somebody like a Munguia would be a great fight. Berlanga, of course, like I say, lost similar fashion just last weekend against Canelo, so everybody is calling for Munguia versus Berlanga, so probably we will end up seeing that next. Or, of course, Mbili, like I said, is with Top Rank now and is really progressing nicely and is looking like a very tough, kind of different type of fighter in the super middleweight division to what we have around the high contenders. And so, yeah, that could be a good fight as well. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like this. Subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.